What is something that is expensive, but only owned by poor people? Best advice I can give is to learn the car and how to work on it. Saves an absolute ton of money and the threshold for getting into it is a lot lower than most people think. I can throw advice your way if you want more. Edit. So to clarify a few things, I see a lot of people talking about how mechanics are all crooks. Full disclosure, I'm a career mechanic, though I started out working on my own vehicles out of pure necessity. At the time I was working about 70 to 80 hours a week, I was paid like shit, and I was in a place that didn't allow working on cars, but I made it work. There are a ton of shops that will absolutely rip you off. That is why it is absolutely imperative that you learn how to work on a car. Also, that's why it's important to find a shop you can trust, not just the one that's cheapest. If a mechanic is really cheap compared to another shop doing the exact same time, that is suspicious. Tools can be expensive. Luckily not all tools have to be. If you have a Harbor Freight in your area, that's the place to go. Shit's cheap as hell and has a no questions asked lifetime warranty on most of their tools. Once you have tools, they will last you as long as you take care of them. How-tos, YouTube is your friend. Be wary of forums. Buy the maintenance manual for your car. It may not be cheap, but it will save your ass in the long run. Also try not to listen to people that work at parts stores, nothing against most of them, but there's a reason why they work there and not a shop. That's why you need to play it dumb. If you want a part-time job, you can just let go when you need to, then don't try to impress them with your amazing qualifications. Write up a new CV and just make it basic. If they ask why you're looking for a part-time job, don't tell them you just need to make some extra cash for that one-time thing. Tell them you just moved to a new apartment/house and the rent is higher, so you need a part-time job to help with the rent. When they ask why they should hire you, tell them you have rent to pay, so you will turn up to work every day. You will have more of a chance to get hired if they think they have you trapped in a work-to-live situation. They are more likely to take you on if they know you need to pay your rent because you will turn up to work to do so. Whereas Ted over there still lives with his parents, so he doesn't care if he turns up to work or not. So just play it dumb. Take the hit to your pride. Let them think you're trapped. Work your ass off for 6 months. Pay for you wife's breast implants or whatever. Cheap equipment of all sorts. Like dollar store items that really shouldn't be available in the dollar store. This is the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. https://moneywise.com/a/Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. The summary is based on Boots, as you might expect from the name, where the laborer only makes enough to pay for cheap boots, let's say $50-ish, meanwhile the foreman, or person in charge, can afford expensive boots, let's say $100-ish. The catch is that the $50 boots only last one season, where the $100 boots last many seasons. The poor laborer can never afford the expensive boots. But over any length of time beyond a single season, ends up paying more for boots than anyone that can afford a better, higher quality pair, because they're buying boots every season. I always see everything in a dollar store by this metric. Sure, it's cheap, and if you only ever intend to use it once or a few times, then that's fine. Anything you need to use more than once, go somewhere else. A good modern example would be pots and pans, bakeware, and similar. At a dollar store, even if you get a reusable baking tin, it's likely going to fail or rust or otherwise become unusable long before something that's 10x the cost at Walmart. Even the Walmart tin will likely last hundreds of times longer than the dollar store tin. Dr. My client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a guy who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer. He and his kids were obviously devastated. My client was a pretty sensitive guy with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, My client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so, in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame/embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion/ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. I worked at a computer repair store as a sales technician. Had a guy come in with a desktop that he wanted Windows reinstalled. I asked him if he wanted me to back up all of his data first, and he told me that he had everything he wanted and just do the wipe. I put it in the queue and he paid and left. I started it about an hour later since an XP install was only about 45 minutes off the network. I didn't bother doing anything else except deleting the original partition and making a new one and installing Windows. About an hour after that, his wife came running in asking if we had a computer with Smith as the last name. I told her I did, and she showed me her ID and said that her husband brought it in to try and destroy all the proof of him cheating and stealing money from their business. When she asked if I had wiped everything yet, I told her I just did a Windows install and didn't actually really wipe anything. I called her husband and told him the situation. I told him his wife was here to get the computer. He asked me if I reinstalled Windows like we spoke about, and I told him I had. He told me I don't give a shit, give her the computer. There isn't anything left on it anyway. I said all right and hung up. I told her that he said I could give it to her, and then explained to her how reinstalling Windows doesn't magically delete everything, and explained to her how I could recover all of her files in a couple of hours. I ended up staying late that night and she bought me pizza and Mountain Dew. I ended up recovering every file he tried to have me destroy and made multiple copies for her. She ended up calling him from the store and reading off some of the messages he had tried to delete from his emails. I was worried that he might try to come back in and confront me, but nothing else ever came of it. Former divorce lawyer. Not so much insane, but unfortunately common, accusing former spouse of molesting the children and domestic violence to retain full custody, and get a restraining order to force spouse out of the marital home. This sets the new status quo for custody, which judges are reluctant to disrupt considerably down the road. Takes months if not years for accused spouse to prove his innocence, and CPS will often find evidence where none exists if accusing party is a good enough manipulator/actor. Pretty horrendous long-term outcome for all parties. Kids are brainwashed against estranged parent when young. Later they often grow to resent the accusing parent for poisoning their relationship with estranged parent. Kids often grow up with multitude of mental health issues. Probably one of the worst things a person can do to their children, all to win against their former spouse. Not my story, but one I read here a couple of years ago. I really hope I don't butcher it as it's been a while, but here goes. There was a super wealthy guy that was a top exec at a Fortune 500 company who was getting a divorce, and it was rather nasty. This guy was pretty much set for life. He had a bunch of stock, houses, and assets in so many places. The ex-wife wanted everything she could possibly get. The husband came up with an idea that if she let him keep everything, he would give her half of his paycheck for the rest of his life. She quickly agreed because his checks were huge, and this also included any bonuses, which were in the millions. As soon as the paperwork was finalized, he quit his job and started to work part-time at a sporting goods store, I can't remember which one. This story was told by another employee there, not the actual guy that got divorced. Anyway, he still had all of his assets, so he would drive to work in a super expensive car, and one day the employee asked how he could possibly afford that car. The guy said he was set for life and didn't even need to work at all, but every Friday when he got his paycheck it made everything so worth it, knowing his ex-wife would only be getting about $150 per check. How about a wholesome, insane one? Yanel, but this was told to me by my mom regarding the divorce she got from my dad. They couldn't settle on an alimony amount. Mom and her lawyer came in with a number, Dad countered with a number. They couldn't agree. Because my dad thought my mom should get twice the amount in alimony she was asking for, and my mom didn't want my dad to give her that much money for month. It took months for them to settle on a figure that appeased both of them. Even then, my mom puts aside the extra above what she wanted in case my dad ever has a financial emergency, and my dad puts aside the extra she didn't want in case my mom ever has a financial emergency. The funny thing is, they don't know the other is putting the money aside for the other. My mom told me about her emergency stash and my dad told my brother about his emergency stash. Bro and I discussed it while talking about what nut jobs our parents are. I've gotten a lot of support for this response, thank you. I'm not going to say that their divorce was perfect, it wasn't. There were still some hurt feelings and resentment from all parties involved. However, my parents, for all their flaws, both accepted their own responsibilities for the falling apart. I think it helps that they still loved each other deeply, they just weren't in love anymore. They have been friends since my mom was 2 and my dad was 3, started dating when mom was 12 and dad was 13. They separated at the ages of 49 and 50. It makes sense that they grew apart. I've had a few people ask why they divorced in the first place. My dad had a girlfriend for at least 15 years, possibly longer. My mom knew, but they agreed to not divorce until my younger brother had graduated high school. My dad got remarried to his girlfriend, my mom has also since remarried. All 4 of them get along famously now. The separation and divorce happened about 10 years ago. I have a friend who went through a nasty divorce and his ex was vengeful as hell, despite him having done nothing wrong like cheating, lying, etc. Basically, he got laid off from good job and the loss of status embarrassed her, especially as he took to being stay-at-home dad and their kids adored him. Never mind, she had MBA and 6-figure job herself. She would buy expensive shit on credit cards to show high expenses, then return it for cash or store credit so that the refund didn't go back on card, so that she could try to get more support. To just get a job, he took one at Home Depot. He'd been an engineer at a tech company. Later on, he landed an IT consulting position that was part-time but paid about what he made at HD working full-time. She petitioned the courts to try and force him to have a full-time job, basically wanting to force him to spend 30 more hours to earn same. Part of his custody granted him dinner one night/week with the kids, i.e. 5 to 7 p.m. He asked for it to be school pickup to 7 p.m. instead, and she refused that, even though from 3 to 5 they were at home with a nanny who had to be paid for that time while mom was at work. This reminds me of something that happened to one of the cats that got adopted from the shelter I volunteer at. A woman came in looking for a specific cat that she saw on the website, saying she thinks it might be her old cat that her ex took when they broke up. Since she and her ex hadn't been in contact, she had no idea why the cat would end up in a shelter, but she was positive it was her cat because of similar unique markings and fur pattern. Sure enough, I take her to the cat's cage, and she bursts into tears, and they both obviously recognize each other. I took the cat out and put them in a visit room together, and damn, it was like they had never even been separated. The cat immediately rubbed against her and curled up in her lap. The woman showed me pics of the cat as a kitten, and I'm pretty sure it was the same cat. It turns out the ex had surrendered the cat because he was moving. The woman was so happy to be reunited, and she wouldn't have even found the cat if she hadn't been browsing the website by chance. One of the happiest adoptions I helped see through. Smiley face. Similar story. My mom lived with my grandpa and his dog Destiny for less than a year, then moved out. Shortly after, my grandpa had to relinquish Destiny before going to prison for a few years. My mom was devastated as the dog was too large for her to keep in her apartment and she couldn't afford to move. This was after a shitty divorce. 2 years later, my mom buys a house and tells me she wants to look at getting a dog, so we go to a local agency's adoption event in a store. We turn a corner in the store and see what looks like an identical copy of Day. She had a unique mohawk tuft. My mom gasps, the dog immediately lays down on the floor with her bum wiggling, and we ask to see the dog as it looked exactly like Day. My mom began sobbing when this dog nuzzled in, knowing exactly who my mom was. As it turns out, it was Day. Destiny was adopted out and one of her new owners had a stroke while pregnant. This plus a new baby in the home triggered Destiny into being extremely protective and aggressive to anyone that was not the mom, so she was returned. My mom signed the papers immediately to have Day back, and it's been 4 years of happiness. We joke that Destiny is my mom's spoiled baby, but after the life she's led, my mom treats her like a big German Shepherd queen. Edited for spelling, as I was shaking while typing this out earlier today. My dad was physically and verbally abusive to my mom and my siblings. He never sexually abused us, but he was serially unfaithful to my mom and had a nasty drug habit. He left rehab so many times, I don't know why she stuck with him that long. When I was in 7th grade, he tried to kill my mom, and she finally files for divorce. And none of his outrageous claims are believed. But I was a knucklehead like my dad. Nobody could tell me right from wrong. I was just following the example I had, and it wasn't good. Mom told me to straighten up or go live with Dad, and like a fool, I chose poorly. It was a year of pure hell. His philosophy was the beatings will continue until morale improves, and he took it literally. He also remarried another drug addict right away, I suspect to make my mom jealous, but it backfired. During that year, he beat me, his wife, and even put my stepbrother's face through a glass coffee table when he tried to defend her from him. I decide I want to go back to live with mom, and it outraged my dad. He went off the rails for a bit. Not an attorney heard this one from a friend of mine. He was put in the middle of his parents' divorce. His mom is a teacher in Ontario, Canada, and she gets paid very well, $120K per year. His dad is just a general laborer and made about $55K per year. When they got divorced, he gave her the house free and clear with the understanding that when she retires he will get 55% of her pension to offset his interest in the house. She agrees. Of course, she has to retire for him to get his money. Fast forward a few years and his mom retires but never tells his dad. The son finds out and told his mom, "Hey, you are retired, you have to start giving dad his money." She tells the son, "Don't tell your dad, please." Fast forward a few more years, he finds out his dad is in financial difficulty because of the downturn in the economy. He backhanded tells his dad that his mom has been retired for a few years now. So he contacts his attorney. Now she is screwed. She pissed off the family, divorce, court because she agreed to this and is now trying to screw him over. In the end, he gets 65% of her pension for the rest of their lives and she has to pay him all the money that she owes him. Not a lawyer but child of divorced parents. Mom got custody of me and my brother. She told my dad she would make us hate him. Went from a big house to a 3-bedroom apartment and grew up poor. Only saw my dad 3 times a year and talked to him on the phone once a week for an hour. Turns out that's what she asked for in court, but she lied and said our dad didn't want to see or talk to us. He paid her child support and alimony every month and she worked full time. We grew up with no Wi-Fi or cable, no sports or after-school activities, and I never went to a summer camp. Apparently we also didn't have insurance for like 2 years when I was 12. Turns out she was pocketing all the money and keeping it in her savings. Apparently around the divorce hearing, when I didn't have insurance, she had 2K in savings, but the judge didn't see that as a red flag. We did hate our dad until we got older and realized he was trying to give us stuff the whole time and offering to send us to summer camp, but she refused. Even after her hoarding all that money and us not growing up with our dad, he still paid for my college and books and bought me a car when mine broke down. I ended up stopping a relationship with my mom when I found out she called me a whore in order to defend my brother's behavior. She didn't bother to reach out even though she's the parent. Later I contacted her on and off trying to fix the relationship. She never bought a book for uni and also refused to let me use her tax info to get a better loan for school when I had to my last year of university. In the end, her bitterness fucked her over because she no longer has a daughter and she has a son who yells at her and uses her for free rent.